Welcome to MacGyvers Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next. If you're not too careful, you just might learn something. Hi there, welcome back to another episode of MacGyvers Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next, and if you're not too careful, you just might learn something. So, the project du jour is a friend of mine's 1994. It's a C4 Corvette, and we're going to put a new aluminum radiator in it, and a thermostat, and of course flush and fill the cooling system. So let's get cracking. Now, one thing is extremely important when you pick one of these cars up, and it really doesn't matter what year, is make sure you're very mindful of the jacking locations. I've seen guys, you know, crack the bodies on these and pop the windshields out of them, and you know, it's just a headache that you don't want. So this particular one is nice enough to have it labeled right on the pinch weld where you can pick the car up from, and once we get it up in the air, we'll take the camera around and we'll show you, and we'll show you where somebody who in the past did it wrong. Now, first and foremost, when you're working on one of these, you want to go ahead and disconnect the negative battery terminal. My friend Jerry here is telling me that if you're not careful, you can brick the ECU on these, and you end up having to pay like $800 to get it brought back to life. So we've gone ahead and disconnected the negative battery terminal. We've set our lift pads, and we're going to go ahead and get it up in the air and drain it. You don't necessarily have to have the car up in the air to change the radiator, but it sure makes it nicer to drain the cooling system. So let's get her on up in the air. Upsy daisy. Okie dokie. Now we want to be careful because we've got the clamshell open here, and while we got tons of room there, we don't necessarily have a bunch there. So that's about as far up as we want to go with this. And really, the only reason we've got it up in the air is to drain the coolant and give Jerry a look underneath, seeing as how he hasn't ever seen the underside of this baby. Alright, now the four corners of this Vette, they have the jacking locations clearly marked, and just because it says that, you still have to be careful, and I'll show you why. And this is where someone previously made a bit of a boo-boo. There's a pinch weld right here that you have to get on, okay, but you got to be careful. You don't want to get into the tub. You got to stay away from that, and you can tell where somebody previously got the lift under it and cracked the fiberglass right there. You know, they do have this little reinforcement plate in here, but that's not going to save you if you try and pick the car up with it. So I'm sure that anybody who goes to buy a Vette, that'd be the first thing they look for. I know I would, just to be safe, because you know, once that's cracked, it's cracked. So, but everything else, you know, is typical. You know, a little oil weepage here and there, nothing terrible. Other than that, looks like he got him a good deal on it. So now that we got her up in the air, we can have a look-see at everything and see how everything is, and then we'll get to draining the cooling system. So what you want to do is you want to hook a piece of hose to that drain cock right there and run it down, and once you pop the radiator cap on the expansion tank, then you can drain all the coolant out. And then you got to take that transmission line out. This is all very nice and done easily from underneath. And then we're going to take these shroud bolts out here, so we can we'll either lift the shroud and the radiator out together or possibly separately. It all depends. We'll see. But we're going to go ahead and get cranking on that. Okay, now the other thing, once we got those fan shroud bolts out of there and our fan shroud's loose at the bottom, you also don't want to forget to pull that wiring harness out where it plugs into both of the fans, because you're not going to be able to get to it from up top. So I think that's it from the bottom. So let's set her down and let's see what let's get the rest of it from the top here. I'm gonna hand the phone over to Jerry here. Okay. Oh, this is the camera. Here. Watch us bring her down. Okie dokie. So now we've done all our bottom stuff. What we'll do is we'll need to go ahead and take all this out, and we'll make sure we unhook our wiring first. This is the mass airflow sensor, intake air temperature sensor, and then we'll get our top radiator hose loose, and then we got this top half of this clamshell, it's fiberglass here. It has some relays. We'll have to unbolt on this side. Then it looks like there's some voltage going on there. Then that top half of that clamshell will come out, and then we can also get the electric fans. Should pull on up out of there. Let's see what we got on the other side. So we got our overflow tube, we got our top training cooler line. Oh yeah, we got our bracket for our air conditioning accumulator. We're gonna have to take that out. Yeah. So we'll just start at the top and work our way down. Okay, so we don't obviously want to tear anything more apart than we really have to. So we just pretty much go with this clamp here at the throttle body. The mass airflow sensor can stay there. We obviously want to be careful. We don't want to knock it around.
We did unattach the wire.
We did unattach our wires, the intake air temperature and the mass airflow. And then these three thumb screws here are two different lengths. You got a short one in the middle that threads into this housing, and the other two are longer and go all the way through and hold this whole assembly into the shroud, which is like right here. You got one there and one there. And once you undo that, the whole shooting match just pops up on out of there. And now next thing we're going to do here is I'll get my assistant Vanna Hicks over here, who can I'll let you hold the camera. It's kind of hard to show it underneath, but you know, GM uses these spring style clamps, and I'm going to use my little G-Whiz tool here that makes easy work out of those things, because these things are these things can be a royal pain in the behind. And you just walk it back like that and I'll let her go. That was, oh sorry, that was easy peasy, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Then we'll just work our hose off of here. And we've got little bracket here that holds this whole arrangement, and we'll just work this on out of here and gently on up and out. We're going to make a little bit of a mess, but you know what, that's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this back with a zip tie, because that's just going to be in our way and piss us off. Okay, and we got most of all of our top stuff unbolted there across the front on the shrouds, but now the fun part is you have to get at those 3 little itty bitty screws way down in there, and do that. This pump has to come off this side, and the coolant reservoir has to come off the other side, and even at then there's one screw that you got to fight with to get at it. But well, a ton of fun. Okie dokie. Now once you get these little gnarly screws out of each side of the shroud, so you can separate the top and bottom half, then you can get the radiator out. So we got our old radiator out, and we cleaned out any debris and vacuumed out the condenser. Condenser was kind of stopped up pretty decent, and now we've got it with our new aluminum radiator down in there. Now we can we'll put our shroud back down and reverse of disassembly. Alright, after fighting those little teeny screws, we finally got our new aluminum radiator in there, and getting our little silly screws back in there, and a little smog pump thing or whatever that is, and Jerry's over there hooking up the rest of the lines, and we'll be ready to fill and bleed this thing before too long. Alright, so we got everything back together. We got our little smog pump thing in there, a little air pump dealy. Got his air intake track back in there. The wires hooked up to the mass airflow sensor and the intake air temperature sensor. We've got a new thermostat in there. He's got the bleeder cracked from when we start to fill it up and bleed it, and he's got everything hooked up on that side on the top, and you got that transmission line snugged up on the top real good there. Okay,
That's good.
so we'll pick her up and get the remainder of the stuff on the bottom. So we've got it all back together, and we filled it up through the expansion tank and made sure you have a bleeder right here, and of course we've got the car elevated a little bit as well, so when we fired it up and ran it a little bit and got it up to temperature, and it's holding pressure, no leaks, and she's not climbing up through the temperature now, which is a good thing. So between the condenser being kind of partially clogged with debris, and I think that radiator of his might have been stopped up just a wee bit, because it's hanging right around 188 right now, which is perfect, you know, just sitting here idling. And he said before it would have been climbing up past 200 by now if before. So that looks good. And of course, when you have it running and you cap it off and you pop your little bleeder down there, you want to make sure that you get a good steady stream coming out of that bleeder, and probably want to pack some rags down in there because this is a LT1 motor with the OptiSpark, so we try not to let anything get down in there if possible. So that was a bit of a job there with of course those stupid 3 little screws on each side made it the most difficult, but with a long-handled 7mm ratcheting box end wrench, that seems to get it pretty good. So anyhow, thank you for watching. Stay tuned because you never know what's coming down the pike next, and please subscribe and feel free to leave comments. I don't claim to be a Corvette expert. My son Michael is got it all covered in that department. So if you're ever out in the Carolinas way, then look up Automotive Specialties and Performance, and his name's Michael Palladini. It's the same as mine, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you out with any Corvette troubles you have. So this is I think we're gonna call this one a success and wrap it up. So happy Cinco de Mayo, and until next time.